All of my content is also posted on 5colorcombo.com, a great website for all of your Magic the Gathering needs, including articles, podcasts, and custom Magic the Gathering tokens and playmats. As a subscriber to my channel, you can use the discount code NITSAHONE5 for a 5% discount in their store. You can find the link in the description below. Hello everyone and happy Friday. I'm NITSAHONE, and each and every week I bring you guys a new Magic the Gathering related top 10 lists on Friday. This week we have a pretty cool one, the top 10 Planeswalkers of all time. Planeswalkers are a relatively new creature type in Magic, only debuting in Lorwyn block, but there's still over 80 of them, and on average I would have to say Planeswalkers are probably the most powerful card type in Magic, since almost all of them see play in one form or another. This list is the kind where I delve into the archives of Magic tournaments, seeing which Planeswalkers made the most appearances in top 8s of Grand Prix or Pro Tours. Next week we will do the flip side of this and talk about the 10 Planeswalkers who were the biggest duds. Before we get started with the list, here's a quick reminder of how the scoring on this type of top 10 works. Cards receive points depending on how many Grand Prix or Pro Tour top 8s they received, with the Pro Tour top 8 worth twice as much as a Grand Prix top 8. Alongside each of the cards, you will see this point breakdown, as well as some other relevant information about the card, such as what formats it has seen success in. Since this list is about Planeswalkers, the most powerful card type in Magic, it is also the most powerful top 10 in the history of MTG top 10s, with cards in the lower half of the list being good enough to be number 1 in several of my other lists. Before we get started, let me know in the comments what you think will prove to be the number 1 card in this list, and we'll see if you're right. I have to say, I myself was a bit surprised by the number 1 card, but let's go ahead and get started with number 10. At number 10, we have Chandra, Pyromaster. Chandras are notoriously mediocre planeswalkers, barring this one and Chandra Flamecaller, who is in Standard right now. Chandra has some pretty great abilities for a wide variety of decks. Her ability to ping creatures and make them unable to block is nice, and her ability to do the red version of draw a card, that is, exile a card and you can play it that turn, is good for grindier matchups. Chandra appeared in a lot of decks that had red mana in them to be sided in during those grindier matchups, since she could draw you an extra card every turn, something that gives control decks fits. She appeared in a large variety of aggro decks when she was in Standard, coming out of the sideboard to help in those matchups, such as Gruul aggro and Jund midrange. You get the picture. Decks with red that were aggressive. However, she also showed up in the main board of several decks, including red Devotion decks, where she was nice because she upped your Devotion while also providing a powerful effect, and she put up a lot of top 8s there, including Pro Tour top 8s. Basically, she was played heavily in both main boards and sideboards during her time in Standard, with her two flexible abilities making her a nice fit in a lot of different metagames. In Modern, Chandra is a common sideboard card for Jund decks where it can be brought in for the grindier matchups, and it's put up about 7 Grand Prix top 8s in that deck, putting up the first 2 at Grand Prix Detroit in 2013, and most recently putting up a top 8 in a Modern event in August of this year, so she isn't likely to slow down on adding to her resume anytime soon. At number 9, we have a Planeswalker with perhaps the most raw power of any Planeswalker, which is why he checks in at 8 mana. That high mana cost didn't deter him from being a major win condition in control decks when he was in Standard, though. Khans of Tarkir Standard was pretty dirtily format, and getting to 8 mana wasn't a huge challenge. Once Ugin comes down, he can wipe the board with ease, and after that, he can slowly tick up to kill your opponents with his +2. Even getting to Ugin's ultimate wasn't unheard of in that format, and obviously that puts you hugely ahead as well. There isn't really another Planeswalker, aside from maybe Elspeth Sun's Champion, who can both wipe the board and serve as a win condition. That's exactly what a control deck wants. He hasn't really made any huge waves in Modern yet, where Tron mostly favors playing Karn since he costs the exact 7 that the Urza's Land produces, but he has 2 GP top 8s in Modern Tron decks. At number 8, we have Nissa, Vastword Seer. While she and the other Flipwalkers don't start as Planeswalkers, I did consider them Planeswalkers for the sake of this list, because in all cases their flip side is very relevant in evaluating them as cards. Nissa is great because she makes sure you don't miss a land drop. And then, later in the game, she transforms into a powerful Planeswalker who can either make a 4/4 token, and remember, she can only do it once because the token is legendary, or she can draw you cards and sort of ramp you as well. Her ultimate is a type of ultimate that can automatically win games too. Nissa saw play in mid-range to controlling decks that had green in them while she was in Standard, and mana was really good when she was in Standard. This meant she showed up in the powerful Abzan decks alongside cards like Siege Rhino, but also in the green-white Megamorph decks running the Maternal Witness Deathmiss Raptor engine. She also showed up in the Seasons Past control decks, and once Collected Company became the most powerful card in Standard, she benefited off of being able to be hit by that powerful spell. In short, she showed up all over the place in Standard. Her strong resume was completely obtained in that format, and she has yet to break through in Modern or other formats. So unlike Ugin and Chandra Pyromaster, it doesn't look like she'll be adding to her resume anytime soon. Next, we have Sorin, Solemn Visitor. Sorin is great because he can produce tokens to protect himself, and he can also pump your entire team and give it lifelink. As a result, he made it he was quite popular in aggro strategies when he was in Standard, where his +1 was often well worth the 4 mana because of the huge life point swing. Like Nissa, he showed up in various incarnations of Abzan decks as a way of making sure the deck would win whatever race it was in. Coupled with Siege Rhino, massive life point swings were something that Abzan decks were incredibly good at. Unlike Nissa, though, Sorin didn't find his way into a bunch of other archetypes, but his numbers are still insane because Abzan was the most popular deck in Standard for a very long period of time, before Nissa was ever even printed, allowing him to attain almost all of his top 8s in an Abzan deck of one kind or another. He hasn't been much more than a blip on the radar in Modern, although he did pick up a top 8 at Pro Tour Fate Reforged in 2015 when Abzan was also a pretty solid deck choice for Modern. However, he hasn't picked up a top 8 since March of this year in Modern, and the Abzan decks of the current Modern format aren't running him, though that could change since he does combo nicely with Lingering Souls. At number 6, we have another Flipwalker, Jace Vryn's Prodigy. If I ever get around to doing a top 10 of the cards that were the most underrated by the community after they got spoiled, Jace would be near the top of that list. The community consensus was just that he wasn't good enough, and that he might be another mediocre Planeswalker like Jace the Living Guild Pact was. Turns out we, and I include myself, as I was in on the prediction as well, were all wrong, and Jace was pretty busted while he was in Standard. Control decks were happy to have the looting effect he provides on the front, and he was not very difficult to flip on turn 3 or 4 with the help of fetch lands and cantrips. Once he flipped, he could start helping you cast instants and sorceries out of your graveyard, and this is the ability that I think a lot of people underrated and led to many people underrating the card to begin with, because we were all sort of surprised we had to actually pay the mana cost of the card you cast. Turns out, this is still pretty busted since he's so easy to cast and so easy to flip, and it gives you a second chance to cast powerful removal spells and even board sweepers that will no longer hit Jace. Jace was one of the most played cards in all of Standard for a while, and while he slowed down after the fetches rotated out, he still managed to put up some consistent finishes in the last Standard format he was a part of. Like Nissa, Jace found his way into basically any deck with a mid-range or control plan that had blue in it. This includes basically all of the Dragons control decks, Jeskai control decks, as well as Jeskai midrange, even Bant Company decks, where once again, like Nissa, he benefited from being able to be hit by Collected Company. Also like Nissa, and also, by the way, he can recast Collected Company, which is just ridiculous sometimes. But also like Nissa, he has seen very little play in Modern, though in 2015 he did find his way into a Grixis control deck that top-8 Grand Prix Pittsburgh, but this build hasn't really caught on and made any other appearances. I do think Jace may be powerful enough for Modern as the format changes over time, but isn't going to be making any big strides in upping his resume anytime in the very near future. At number 5, we have another Jace, Jace Architect of Thought. Jace is sort of the ideal control planeswalker. His +1 helps protect both him and you, making all attacking creatures lose 1 power, well, all of your opponent's attacking creatures, and his -2 is a weird combination of Brainstorm and Fact or Fiction, which will net you at least 1 card every time you use it. He was one of the strongest cards in Return to Ravnica block, as evidenced by his appearance in 5 of the top 8 decks at Pro Tour Dragon's Maze in 2013, which was a block-constructed Pro Tour. He was also played a ton in Standard the entire time he was in it, appearing in decks as varied as Blue-White Control and Esper Control, but also in more aggressive decks like Devotion to Blue. He even made a splash in Modern, though primarily in the sideboards of Splinter Twin decks where it could be brought in to slow down your opponent and draw you cards, and since Twin has been banned, he hasn't made an appearance in a Modern top 8, so it's likely he will add to his resume anytime soon. At number 4, we have a third consecutive Jace, which is pretty crazy. Jace also is the only Planeswalker who has more than 1 card on the list, so you can see sort of how unbalanced Jace Planeswalkers have been. But now we're looking at the most powerful Jace of them all, and it may be a Planeswalker who could have the title of the most powerful Planeswalker of all time, Jace the Mind Sculptor. You may ask, if he's the most powerful of all time, why isn't he number 1 on the list? Well, that's because he was so powerful that he had to be banned. He's the only Planeswalker to have ever been banned, and he is currently the only Planeswalker banned in Modern. Having 4 abilities is already a lot, as most Planeswalkers have 3. While his +2 is actually really underwhelming, his zero-costed ability that mimics Brainstorm is incredibly powerful, and he can also protect himself by bouncing your opponent's problem creatures. This was early on in the history of Planeswalkers, and Wizards clearly went a little bit overboard with this one. Jace was making a strong showing in various control decks in the early part of its existence in Standard, but then it became part of one of the most powerful and busted decks of all time, Cawblade, which made use of other stupid powerful cards in the format like Stoneforge Mystic and Batterskull, and this is where Jace picked up a stupid number of top 8s. In 2011 at Pro Tour Paris, 5 of the top 8 decks ran this Jace. Later that year at Grand Prix Barcelona, 6 of the top 8 decks ran Jace. Then at Grand Prix Dallas in 2011, all 8 of the top 8 decks ran Jace. After this string of unprecedented success and the homogenization of the format, Jace got banned in July of that year, but he had already obtained a stupid resume in Standard alone. Had he gone unbanned, I have no doubt he would be number 1 on this list. He also dominated Extended before he got banned there, putting up 6 top 8s at Grand Prix Kobe in 2011, and he was also banned when Modern was created as a format, and he's never been unbanned. He's also so powerful that he sees play in Legacy, pretty much the only Planeswalker who does consistently, and he's picked up 3 top 8s at Grand Prix Columbus just last month, but those events aren't as common, so Jace is adding more to his resume, though I don't think he's ever going to challenge the top 3 on this list because he isn't going to show up consistently in Grand Prix lists because he can only show up in Legacy. Now we move to the top 3. The top 3 on this list, where the race is very tight, with all 3 of them being within single digits of one another with regard to their score. So this is a top 10, or at least a top 3, that will likely see a lot of fluctuation over the next year or so I may need to revisit it. For now, though, let's see who are the top 3. At number 3, we have Liliana of the Veil, a candidate for maybe the second most powerful Planeswalker of all time after Jace. I actually figured, when I started doing research on this list, that she would be number 1. As you can see, she isn't, though she is within 4 points of the lead, so Liliana could still get there. Liliana is incredibly powerful, in large part because of her mana cost. 3 mana for a Planeswalker frequently results in that Planeswalker being quite strong, and Liliana is sort of the prototype of that. If you have solid abilities and you cost 3 mana and you're a permanent that stays in play, you're going to be incredible. And decks that run her love her because she can come down on turn 3 and make an opponent lose a creature, and then she can slowly pick apart people's hands. Her ultimate is reasonable, but usually one alternates between her +1 and -2, and that is enough to get you to victory if you manage to play her on turn 3. When she was in Standard, she appeared in a wide variety of decks, including not only control decks where you would expect to see her, but also in some more aggressive builds, like Mono-Black Infect and Blue-Black Zombies. Turns out, at 3 mana, a lot of decks are pretty happy tapping out for Liliana. If you've played a 1-drop and a 2-drop, and then play her on turn 3, her -2 can often kill the opponent's blocker, so your 1 and 2-drop can get in. And the real problem with Liliana is she only has to take up again once after that, and she can just eat another creature. Liliana is a bit of an aberration on this list. All of the other cards on it put up the bulk of their score in Standard, but Liliana has actually been more impressive in Modern, where she is one of the most essential cards in the powerful Jund decks of the format. That is more or less the only deck where she is played, but Jund has been a legitimate Tier 1 deck ever since Modern was created in 2011, so she's put up a lot of numbers in the format over that time, and picked up a Modern top 8 as recently as a few months ago, so she will continue to add on to her resume. Now, let's see who is at number 2, within striking distance of Liliana. Gideon, ally of Zendikar, who we have at number 2, and he's a legitimate threat to make it to number 1 on this list. If you've been playing Standard for the last year, you know that Gideon has been in a ton of decks, and as a result of that, he has put together an incredible string of finishes. Despite being the newest card on this list, he clocks in at number 2, so that should tell you something, and he's only a few points behind the leader. In fact, I would predict that by the time he rotates, which will be later now that Standard rotation has changed, he will be number 1 on this list. Gideon first rose to prominence in the powerful green-white tokens decks of Standard in 2015, but it didn't take long for people to realize he's good in basically any aggressive strategy. He makes creature tokens that can protect him and help you go wide. He himself can become a 5/5 beater, and in a pinch, he can also just give you an emblem. And unlike most Planeswalkers, you can use his ultimate right away to get that emblem. Many mid-range and aggro decks run him to give their deck some strength in the long game, and if you don't have him main board, you can bet he is in the sideboard since he is a bit of a nightmare to deal with for control decks. So people cited him in frequently against people running Languish back when it was in Standard, and today people are still doing the same against cards like Radiant Flames, Fumigate, and Kozilek's Revenge. There isn't really a deck with white in it that Gideon hasn't appeared in since he has been in Standard, and they aren't even all aggro decks, as he has also appeared in some black-white control decks as well. He will continue to up his resume in the current Standard format. At Grand Prix Kuala Lumpur in October, just last month, Gideon appeared in all 8 of the top 8 decks, so we're kind of getting close to Jace the Mind Sculptor territory here. So far, he hasn't picked up a single top 8 in Modern, though he has come close in some token-centric Modern decks, so he may even have a life after he rotates. While Gideon will probably become the number 1 card in this list in the end, let's take a look at who he is chasing. And at number 1, we have Elspeth, Sun's Champion. I mentioned her earlier on in the list when I was discussing Ugin. Like Ugin, she can often clear the board of problem creatures and then provide you with a win condition. What's more is she can pretty effectively +1 a couple of times and then clear the board of all large creatures so your tokens can just win you the game. She is one of the best Planeswalker win conditions there is because of how easy it is for her to protect herself and kill opponents' creatures. It isn't even uncommon to get her emblem off because it turns out an army of 3 tokens every turn does a pretty good job of keeping her loyalty up. She was a very powerful and commonly played card in control and mid-range decks of the Standard format she was in, getting top 8s in decks like Esper Control, Orzhov Midrange, Blue-White Control, Jeskai Tokens, Abzan decks, and so on. Near the end of her time in Standard at Grand Prix London in 2015, she managed to sweep the event, with at least one copy of Elspeth being in all top 8 of the decks that finished in the top 8 of that event. Recently, she has even started making some appearances in Modern, appearing in a Jeskai control deck that finished in the top 8 of Grand Prix Dallas earlier this year. That said, she hasn't netted a huge number of top 8s in Modern, and I really don't think she is on pace to defend her crown from Gideon, who's only 2 points behind her and still legal in Standard. That does it for this week's MTG Top 10. Next week, as I said, I'll be doing a companion piece to this one. Instead of talking about the Planeswalkers who are great, we're going to look at the ones that are the worst of all time. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click the like button. If you have any suggestions for future Top 10s, post them in the comments below. And if you want to make sure you catch all of my MTG Top 10s and other MTG content, don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching.